I'm Tony Lynn Morelli. I am a research ecologist with the U.S. Geological Survey Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center, based in the Northeastern U.S. out of University of Massachusetts. I'm also an associate editor for the SCB journal Conservation Science and Practice, which is a newer journal. Check it out. We're excited to continue our SCB webinar series featuring recent publications from the 3 SCB journals in 2021. So you're here, and you're in the right place if you're here for the SCB Emerging Issues in Conservation Seminar. The SCB Emerging Issues in Conservation Seminar takes place on Wednesdays and highlights speakers whose papers are currently in press at Conservation Biology, Conservation Letters, and Conservation Science and Practice. And it was, I think, a brainchild of Mark Schwartz, realizing that we could take advantage of this terrible opportunity of us all being apart to do some speaking to each other over Zoom. So we're lucky today to have Katia Ferraz speaking to us about bridging the gap between researchers, conservation planners, and decision makers to improve species conservation decision making. Katia Ferraz is based at the Forest Science Department at the Luis de Queiroz College of Agriculture, University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. She is the head of the Wildlife Ecology Management and Conservation Lab at the University of Sao Paulo. She coordinates ecological and conservation projects in collaboration with NGOs, state and federal organizations for biodiversity conservation in Brazil, and she is a member of the Conservation Planning Specialist Group from IUCN Species Survival Committee. Katia is committed to assist and guide the participatory modeling process in conservation planning workshops of endangered species. I'm so excited to be here introducing Katia. I think that co-production and translational science is where our field is headed, and I am a burgeoning learning practitioner of it. So I'm happy to have her teach us today. The floor is yours, Katia. And you may not have known that I muted you a couple minutes ago, so you have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry, that was a global mute that affected you.
That's okay. You hear me now. So thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you also for organizing and inviting me to join this seminar. Thanks you all for being here, joining this moment with me. I am very happy to give this talk, and also for seeing so many friends and colleagues here. So thank you so much for joining, for coming. I will start my presentation presenting my co-authors. So actually, I'm a very lucky person because this is a great team. So myself and my students, we are from the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and some of us are also part of the Conservation Planning Specialist Group from the IUCN. Kathy and Arnaud are my colleagues from the CPSG also, and Arnaud is the head of the Institute for the Conservation of Wild Animals. And my colleagues, Ronaldo and Rogério, from the ICMBio, the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. So we spent the last 11 years working together to increase the effectiveness of using a well-known modeling tool, the species distribution modeling for species conservation. So our paper describes the process we developed, it tested in the last 11 years to assist and guide conservation decisions as part of the conservation workshops for many endangered species worldwide. So I will start talking briefly about the modeling tool So what is it? What is it for? And why is a process necessary to increase its conservation effectiveness? Then I will explain the process per se, the participatory modeling process. So the context in which it was developed, so for what, how it works, and what is necessary for the PMP STM be effective. Then I will give you a few successful examples of conservation decisions taken by the use of the PMP STM. And then I will finish with some concluding remarks. So the species distribution modeling is a well-known tool, and it's a tool that relies on the prediction of the probability of species presence across a landscape, though a correlative approach that searches for associations between the species presence or GPS locations and environmental predictors. So such as bioclimatic, topographic, anthropogenic, predictors derived from the landscape, etc. So by using some algorithms, it's possible to run models and to have at least two models as a modeling result. So the first one is the potential distribution map that shows the suitable and the unsuitable areas for the species presence. And the other map that shows there is a probabilistic map, and it shows the probabilistic values related to the probability of species presence or related to the suitability of the landscape for the species presence. So this tool has been widely used for a variety of ecological and conservation purposes, as demonstrated here by Araújo and collaborators. And they found more than 6,000 studies using or mentioning the STMs in the last 10 years in peer-reviewed journals. So these two graphs confirms the huge number, the increasing in number of published articles in the last years, especially after the 2006, when Maxent, the most common used algorithm, comes up. So despite the STM has been widely tagged as valuable tools for conservation, it's still difficult to find evidence of STMs effectively guiding conservation actions and decision-making process in the scientific literature. And we believe that what explains the difficulty in using this tool, supporting the decision-making process, is the gap between researchers and the decision makers. So most of us modelers, we are researchers, and we are in the academia or research institutes, while conservationists and decision makers are in conservation agencies or NGOs trying to deal to solve real conservation problems. So aiming to bridge this gap and improve the efficacy of this tool for species conservation, we decided to work together to co-develop a process, assuming that the modeling results must be used to guide decisions and setting priorities for the species conservation. So we developed and tested a participatory modeling process to both ensure the proper use of the STMs as a tool, and also their efficacy and impact in conservation. So the PMP was designed and implemented as part of the endangered species conservation planning workshops in the last 11 years, especially in the National Action Plans, the NAPs, led by the ICMBio in Brazil, and the Population Habitat Viability Assessment, GPHVAs, led by the IUCN SSC CPSG. So the PMP takes advantage of the opportunity provided by having the stakeholders assembled for NAPs and PHVAs dedicated to conservation planning for the species, so that the STMs can be effectively matched the conservation planning needs. So one of the host organization and supporter is the ICMBio, so the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. ICMBio is a federal authority in Brazil linked to the Ministry of Environment, and it's responsible for the biodiversity conservation. So among all the activities that the ICMBio coordinates, there is the National Action Plans, the NAPs, for endangered species. So the NAP provides a detailed proposal of actions, and all NAPs are always produced in workshops, conservation workshops, and aiming to save a species or to reduce the threat to the species, to endangered species. And it's a process that reinforces the participation and the collaboration, the engagement of all participants. It's designed to prepare and implement these strategies, engaging different sectors of the society. The other hosting institution is the CPSG, a specialist group of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, Species Survival Commission, SSC, and the CPSG designs and conducts conservation workshops worldwide, addressing problems and focusing in solutions using sound science. So among all the activities that there is carried out by the CPSG, there are workshop process, and the PHVA is part of these workshops. So the PHVAs combine traditional population viability analysis with structured facilitation tools, aiming problem solving and engaging workshop participants. So it's also built and designed as an integrative process, engaging stakeholders to have more effective recommendations and actions for species conservation. So since I started to be invited to join both types of the conservation workshops, the NAPs and the PHVAs started to include the modeling results and recommendations for their use on their reports and communications. So this facilitated a lot the model used by different stakeholders. And so PMP-SCM focuses on stakeholder engagement and commitment to co-develop STMs that will in turn support and guide conservation decisions. So all participants in the conservation workshops are invited to share data, to share their knowledge, their expertise, and they are also involved in all steps of the modeling process. And even during the validation, model validation, and model use. And the level of successful stakeholder engagement will influence how the model will guide the decision-making process. So the stakeholder engagement, it's a vital activity. It's extremely important and should be the core of the process. So the stakeholders must understand the modeling foundations to be included and to be able to participate in the process to co-develop models. And the leader of the process, in our case, the modeler, must guarantee this, so must work for this. So to be effective, we adopted two main practices inspired in translational ecology to ensure stakeholder participation and the use of solid ecological knowledge in decision-making. So the participation based on the philosophy of empowerment, equity, trust, and learning, and a highly qualified facilitation throughout the process. So the PMP is led by an expert modeler. In all these workshops, I was the expert modeler, and I worked to build the bridge between researchers and species experts from one side and conservationists, planners, and decision makers on the other side, assuring the proper use of the STMs. So the facilitation was an essential key to make this possible, promoting information exchange and STM development in an integrative way. So we endorse what is suggested by Gizan and collaborators about the importance of having a kind of a translator that links the science and the conservation, or the researchers and the conservationists and decision makers. So, and by our experience, we suggest that this translator can be the modeler if the modeler has facilitation, communication, and mediation skills. So it's extremely essential for us that the modeler understand that it's more than only modeling. So it's about dealing with people and engaging them in the decision-making process to reach the desired goals by the group. So we structured the PMP in two different phases, the workshop planning and the modeling workshop. So the first phase consists of workshop planning. So it is scheduled in general to occur 6 to 12 months before the species conservation workshop, but it can be also scheduled to occur simultaneously with the conservation workshops. It's a harder task for the modeler, but it's all also possible. The host organization invites researchers and species experts based on their knowledge in the focal species to co-develop the preliminary SDMs. So all the participants will be involved in at least these three activities. So the first one is the model conceptualization to set objectives, goals, and conservation needs. And typically the goal is to provide a high quality potential distribution model to help guide the discussions and make decisions on conservation action for the species. And the conservation needs are, for example, identifying the most suitable areas for searching for a rare species, or finding potential suitable corridors to connect protected areas or subpopulations, or even identifying suitable patches for design new protected areas. So just as example. This activity is extremely important because this will guide the next one. And the next one is the model building. And so all the participants are invited to share their own GPS locations. Only up-to-date and high-quality data is accepted for modeling, so avoiding bias and uncertainties. So we avoid to use online data or historical data, for example. Stakeholders are also, participants are also invited to help in the definition of the geographic space, so the space to be modeled. And also they provide essential information about the species biology and species requirements that help in the definition of the conceptually meaningful predictors. So after this, the modeler can start the model running, so can start to build the model. And This is an activity more related to the model expertise. It's a technical activity, so most of the time, the participants of the workshop are not involved in this activity. Of course, they are welcome if they are interested in, but in general, they are not. They are interested in the products, they are interested in the models. So the modeler will choose the best algorithms, will set the best parameters to guarantee the best model or a high quality model by the end. And the modeler will run some preliminary SDMs to be validated by the stakeholders in the next phase of the process. So just as an example of the first positive result of the PMP STM is the co-production of the high quality species presence database. So in this map of Brazil, each color represents one collaborator that shared his own data for modeling. So this map with a high quality database can be used to guide many decisions and is included as part of the reports by the end of the workshop. So the second phase of this process is the modeling workshop that in general occurs as part of the NAP or the PHVA or as part of any other species conservation planning workshop. So the modeling workshop occurs simultaneously. And it focuses more broadly on the stakeholders' representativeness of different sectors of the society. So the host organization invite, besides researchers and species experts, federal and state government agencies, NGOs, representatives from industry, farming, agriculture, mining, logging, traditional and indigenous people, landowners. So invited everyone that affect or is affected by the species conservation to participate and in this workshop. So all of them will be engaged in the next 3 activities of the modeling process. So the first one is the model validation. So the modeler make use of the facilitation process and try to endeavor all the inputs from the participants. So expert opinions are incorporated to improve modeling results. So the modeler will show all the preliminary models for in a plenary for all the participants. And he will stimulate them to discuss and to participate until have the best model, a final model selected by a consensus. So after this, after having the best model selected, then all the participants will work with the modeler on the conservation needs. So the modeler will perform post-processing analysis, for example, to prioritize suitable areas for the species or for any conservation action or effort, zoning, designing corridors, among others. So just as an example, so in the model validation and selection, this is the case of Chequan Peccary PHVA carried out in 2012 and 2014, sorry. And the modeler stimulated the participation of the attendees by asking them mainly 2 questions. And these questions are related to the common errors in modeling. But the participants, the stakeholder, of course, they don't know this. They don't need to know this. So the first one is related to the omission error. So the modeler, for example, asks are there some areas where the species occur, but that was not predicted by the model? So if yes, no, or if yes, where? So the modeler will catch all the inputs to run new models if necessary. And the second question is, for example, are there some areas where the species was predicted to occur, but you believe it is actually not present? So this question is more related to the over-prediction or commission error. So these questions help them to get involved in the discussion and also provide elements for them to reject or accept the model. And based on this, the modeler will run new models as much as necessary until have the final one, the best model that should be accepted by all the participants. And in all workshops we carried out that I participated, we were successful in having a best model accepted by all. So another example is related to model use. So it comes from the Javan leopard, GPHVA, carried out in 2018 in Java. And for example, from the final model, we were able, with the stakeholders' engagement and participation, to select the larger and good patches for Javan leopards, and also to find some new areas to be confirmed in the field. And also we can go far, for example, and we can make exercises to find the best routes to connect the best or the more suitable patches for the species. So depends what the stakeholders need or identify as a conservation need for the species conservation. So here you have the figure that is in the paper, just summarizing all the phases and activities of the model. So I will give you a few successful examples and showing good results. So the PMP-STM along these years assisted more than 25 endangered species. So here are some of the species contemplated by the PMP, and for most of them, the final model is still being used, influencing conservation decisions. And this participatory approach allowed us to update potential species distribution and evaluate the environmental suitability for the species occurrence for all the modeled species. For some species, we were able to identify potential corridors and priority areas for implementing different conservation and management actions. For others, we were able to identify new potential areas for species searching, with a very successful results that comes from the field by using the model. For others, we were able to predict potential impact under deforestation and climate change scenarios. And also, for a few of them, we were able to provide valuable input for population viability analysis. So the best successful example from the PMP-STM that we have is the one described in detail in the manuscript. So the Jaguar Action Plan was carried out in 2009 and involved many different stakeholders in the workshop. And I was there. I was invited for the first time to run models simultaneously to the National Action Plan workshop. And it was a very, very good exercise, working at the same time with them and for the first time. But we were very successful by the end. And so, for example, we were able to identify 10 priority jaguar conservation units in the Caatinga biome, a very threatened biome in Brazil. And our model allowed it to identify highly suitable areas for the species presence. And also we were able to find corridors and best routes linking some of these highly suitable patches. And after almost 10 years, the model helped in the creation of a new protected area in Brazil, the Boqueirão da Onça National Park, that was designed and created based on the results of our model. So this is the area. And so it was a very important action and decision made by the use of our model. So another example comes from the blue-eyed ground dove. So this wonderful bird is one of the most critically endangered bird species in the world. So it's a species endemic from the Cerrado in Brazil, the savanna, Brazilian Cerrado. And after 75 years, 11 individuals were rediscovered in 2015 in only one small remnants of forest in Cerrado. And in 2019, only the population was about only 27 individuals. Then in 2019, the conservation workshop using PMP-STM was carried out. I was invited to run these models, and it was a very hard task. So few points, so small area to be modeled, but by the end, with the specialists' participation and help, we were able to have a good model by the end, accepted by all. And after this, after the workshop, this model started to guide the specialists in the field. And in 2020, 2 more individuals were found in the suitable small patch located close to the known area. And this led us very happy and very enthusiastic about the results. And the species specialists continues using this model in the field, searching for new individuals. And the last example also comes from a bird from Brazil, so red-browed parrot. So it's a vulnerable and endemic species from the Atlantic forest. And in 2018, the conservation workshop using PMP-STM was carried out. And after the specialists' contributions, we were able to have a final model by the end of the workshop. And since from them, the model has guided the team in the field, searching for new sites. So new sites have been successfully found, improving searching efforts in the field and increasing the chances of finding the species. So it's also a very nice result. So what we have learned along these years. So I think the most important part of the success of our process is the engagement of the stakeholders. So it is essential to guarantee that STMs reach their full potential guiding decisions in conservation. Modular should assist the conservationists and decision makers in model use even after the conservation workshop. So this is a connection forever. So we are always linked and working together for the species conservation. Besides modeling expertise, other skills such as facilitation, communication, and mediation are necessary to assure the effectiveness of the process, of course. SEM results should be frequently updated in an iterative process. So for most of the species, we have updated our model in iterative process using the same process every 3 to 5 species a year. So it depends on the species. And the end users of the STM have not been only researchers. So decision makers and policymakers have been able to use the model results, influencing and guiding conservation decisions, helping policy development, and supporting public actions for conservation and management decisions. And by the end, we concluded that we bridged this gap and assured the proper use of this tool for species conservation. So before finishing, I really would like to thank all the researchers and conservationists that dedicated all their time, energy, and effort to save species from extinction. So along these years, I had the opportunity, I was very lucky and had the opportunity to know so wonderful people that inspired and moved me many and many times. So thank you for letting me learn with you. Thank you for sharing your data, your knowledge, your species with me. You all were very essential for the process, so allowing me to contribute at least a little with the wonderful job that you have been doing for species conservation. So I'm deeply grateful for you all. And I am also deeply grateful by the host organizations and supporters that invited me. So thank you for all you have been doing for me along these years. So thank you, ICMBio and Parque das Aves in Brazil. And thank you, the CPSG and the IUCN. Thank you, all the collaborators, the group, the specialist groups, the conservation projects, NGOs, and conservation centers. So you were very important, very essential. And it has been a challenging task, as you never know when you start. So I am in this photo with my friend, Christine Breiten-Moser, the chair of the cat specialist group in my first experience, so the NAP for Jaguar Conservation in Brazil in 2009. And my face says everything, so not always easy, but always rewarding. So I hope my talk and this paper can inspire others to do the same for improving the use of this fantastic tool for the species conservation. So thank you for your attention, and I'm glad to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ferraz. That was fantastic. Take a moment for some applause.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to see everyone's faces. We have some great questions. I just wanted to note that it turned out that the room was limited at 100 people. We didn't realize that. We'll fix it next time. It was at 100 the entire time. And anytime someone dropped, someone else popped in. So if you hear of anybody sad that they didn't make it, this is recorded. And in future seminars of this series, we'll make sure that the limit is more than 100. Everyone's still figuring out how Zoom works. So I have a lot of questions from people already. So I'll just start sharing them with you. Katerina Herman says, this is a very, very interesting and valuable to learn about. Can you tell more on how deep someone needs to go into the detail of modeling and terminology when preparing the stakeholders for the creation of the model? Some stakeholder groups, for example, government agencies, might not invest much time prior to a workshop in familiarizing with a rather technical topic. How to solve or prepare for this?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's of course a very challenging. And so at the beginning, this process was not divided in two phases. So some stakeholders that were not interested in modeling details, for example, and it was very hard to get them listening and being involved in the process. And so based on the first experiences, we decided to divide the modeling, the PMP in two phases. So in the first phase, when I am working more close to the researchers and species experts, I can go more in detail about the modeling stuffs and foundations and terminologies, because they are more used with some of the concepts, for example. And of course, at the beginning, I always ask if they know something or if they have an idea about the tool, and it depends on their background. I adapt myself to go more in detail or not. And so it's not so difficult when I am talking about modeling in the first phase with the researchers and species experts. So of course, I try not to use so many specific terms. So I try to translate as the example I gave by the questions. So of course, I am gathering information to infer about errors in modeling, but I never say this, so they don't need to know. And for the stakeholders, in the second phase, the other representatives from the other sectors, I always give a very, very broad and a kind of a superficial explanation about modeling, just saying the necessary. Because for them, what matters is the model results. So when I show the model, so I explain how they can interpret the results. And for them, doesn't matter how the model was built. So they're not interested on this most of the time. And if they are, so I'm always available to sit and with a small group and to explain what they need or they want to do. So, every time is one time. So it's not all the same, but it works. So I'm not sure if I answer all the questions. So.
Yep, you got a thumbs up from the questioner, so you're good. So Sarah Gottlieb had to leave early, but asked a question in the chat, and Doug Purcell followed up to ask the same question. So they're curious to know if the open standards for the practice of conservation is a part of the planning you used in your framework.
If the open standards, can you repeat, please?
Yeah, so this, if it's not familiar to you, then you can just pass.
No.
But open standards for the practice of conservation.
So yes, it actually it's not part. So I never tried to incorporate or to put together, but or may use the open standards. So, but it's a good idea. So something that I can maybe explore. So thank you.
Great. Okay, so Musa Chiriat asked, what is the potential of using SDM for non-wildlife species conservation or other conservation issues?
What is, sorry?
What is the potential of using SDM for non-wildlife species conservation or other conservation issues? So SDM for not species conservation.
For not species conservation, I think it's, the potential can be the same. Depends on the purpose of of using it. So I think the tool, it's a powerful tool. It's but depends on how you use it. So it depends more on the modeler expertise and how this could match with the different purposes. So it works for endangered species, for rare species, for um, worldwide species with a broad, wide distribution. So I think the potential there is great. It's always the same. So
Yeah, I could imagine. I'm not sure if this is exactly what was meant in the question. Yeah,
so
non-fauna. So right, so you could certainly do is you could take the species distribution model tools to model whether there's like cold streams somewhere. I don't think people really do that, but you could. So I think there's probably a lot of opportunity for thinking about habitat availability in a way of it not being habitat or species, but something else. So that I think is really interesting. We have a couple questions that are more like logistic specific questions. So Paula Drummond asked, do the stakeholders have their costs covered by the workshop organization, or do their institution fund them?
So I think both. So the institution are invited, and also and the institution can send some representatives, and also you can invite to, or do personal invitation. So we can have, I think, both situation. So depends on the situation, and this is something that the host organization working with the local government and with the local people responsible for, or the specialist group, or people responsible for the species conservation decide. So I never participate on this. So I'm only invited to join to the workshop, and but I'm not involved in the activities made by the host organizations. So, for example, as the invitation of the stakeholders.
So in the same vein of inclusivity and trying to have access for people, Musa Chiriat asks, how can one access the SDM software? Does it come with a cost?
Well, I only use free algorithm and softwares, and so they are open for open access for everybody. And I think it's important to say that, for example, I don't think I am the best modeler or an excellent modeler. I know how to do and I know how to perform this. And when I need some extra expertise, I have my team that can help me. And I think this is really important to guarantee the successful modeling. So this is more important than know everything about modeling, but nothing about dealing with people or facilitating a process or something like this, because of course it will not work. So
this is great. So Tieni Muampampa asks, or mentions, you might have already said this, but can you imagine doing this with local knowledge holders that do not have primary or secondary education? And I just wanted to add to that, how do you think that the objectives might change, or if you have any experience with this, thinking maybe, for example, for Indigenous peoples, if they have a longer view, multiple generations of perspective of thinking about what we're modeling to.
mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, it's not so common that Indigenous people or traditional people or people with no background formation participate in these workshops. They can be invited, they can join. but of course it's harder to engage them in the process. So sometimes what I do, it is I work with all of them in a plenary, but I also work with them on a small group and using other terms and words and other alternatives to let them know what I am talking about, and to bring them more close with me, to participate and to be to feel part of it. So of course it should be, I think, treated with care and on a different way. And so I think they need and they require more attention and more care, of course. Otherwise, you will not be successful including them in the process. So they will be there, but not there, not helping or not being part of the decision. So, and I think there is no rule, of course. So you need to feel and to act. And so there is no formation or no background for you, just you learn by doing so, and sometimes with some errors, and so this is something that you build together and day by day. So
That's great. I just want to say that I'll save the chat box because you're getting so many wonderful messages from everyone that I want to make sure you get a chance to read.
Yeah.
I'll just a couple more questions and then we'll close up. Nanette Reese asked, are the current 25 plans integrated into AZA's SAFE program? That might have been something specific from earlier in your talk. Okay. Well, Nanette has another question. Can you talk about the programs you use for analysis, such as Maxent, R, Linkage Mapper?
If I can talk about the programs I use, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time I use the Maxent because it's well known and yeah, for all reasons, you know. And Maxent always give what you need. But for rare species, for example, for that bird, that critically endangered bird, we run a consensus model. So we run models in R, and so we use more than 4 algorithms to have a good model by the end. So it depends on the situation, but most of the time, Maxent is it's the best one and the more common used by me. So.
Yeah, and just to say for those who haven't used Maxent, it's very accessible. It's very has a great interface where you don't have to use it in R if you don't want to.
Yeah, and so fast. So, and it's really important because sometimes I have 2 or 3 hours. So when I show preliminary models and for example, at the beginning of in the afternoon. And so, and I have lots of inputs and I have new ideas to improve modeling. And so I have 3 or 4 hours to run new models to come back at the end of the same afternoon to show the models again and to see if they accept or reject. So, and Maxent is very fast and so this makes my job easy also. So, and it is important. It's part of the process.
All right, one last question from Dominique Henry or Dominique Henry. This is a very international audience. A question about omission error, and how the stakeholders provide input in this regard. Yeah. SDMs are often used because we have imperfect knowledge about where species occur. So how does it work when someone says that they think a species doesn't occur in a place that they or other stakeholders have not looked? Perhaps I'm misunderstanding how it works in practice, in which case, please could you explain a bit more about the model rejection / acceptance step? Thanks.
Okay, so thank you. It's a very nice question. And and it is very interesting because, of course, omission error, it's an error that we should avoid. So in modeling, because this means that model failed. So this means that model didn't predict um, an area where it's supposed to species to occur. So what I do when I offer the menu of the STMs and I do this question, so I always ask for them to point areas where the species is known to occur or is expected to occur, but is not in the model. So for example, the model says that the area is unsuitable for the species or has low probability values related to the species presence, but the specialists know the species is there or know that is expected that the species is there. So when they just put, they show me these areas, then depends, of course, on the answer. I know that the model failed. So, and then I tended to reject this model, but I am a neutral person. So, but always, most of the time, they will reject this. And then I will try to change the predictors or to set new parameters or make use of different algorithms. So I will try everything I can to change the model results. And this is not so hard and not so difficult for them to understand. And it's not so difficult for us to realize that the model failed. The problem is the contrary, because sometimes model over-predicted the areas because we are modeling the predictors related to the species distribution, but not related to the species presence, but not related to the species absence. For example, I try to incorporate threats and as predictors in my model, but sometimes it's impossible. For example, for many areas, what explains the absence of the species is the hunting pressure. And we don't have hunting pressure as a predictor, as a layer, as a spatial layer. So sometimes the model predicted an area with high hunting pressure as suitable for the species presence. And it is true if the hunting pressure is not there, but it is, but the algorithm doesn't know. Right. So most of the time I ask them to forget their prediction because we are trying, what we are saying is that area is suitable if the threat is removed. And so this is something that helps them to design action or conservation actions to maybe consider that area as suitable for the species managing, for example, threats or reducing hunting pressure, for example. Right.
Well, that was an excellent answer and an excellent talk. So last round of applause for Dr. Katia Ferraz. Thank you to Martin Strauss, who is coordinating this winter series of seminars. He's put together a fantastic lineup over the next several weeks. Next presentation will be Wednesday, February 10th, 800 GMT, a global view on evidence-based effectiveness of interventions used to protect livestock from wildcats by Igor Korozian at Göttingen University. Thanks again, Dr. Ferraz, and everyone who attended, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, you all. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for your attention. So nice to see you all here. Bye-bye.